This is the Spirit and Wellness Show. News and information from a higher perspective. With your host, Harry Wilkinson.
Yes, this is your host, Harry Wilkinson, and welcome to the Spirit and Wellness Show. This is the show where we take a look at the days and weeks, events, happenings in the world of politics, and happenings in the world of entertainment and technology and science and all of the things, all of the stories that we interact with through our media, whether it be internet or traditional news sources or NPR on the radio or whatever it might be. We take a look at these stories from a higher perspective. So those of you who have been listening to the show know a bit about what I do here, will understand what I mean when I say a higher perspective, and particularly in the kind of news cycles we've been having lately, surrounding the presidential election, the upcoming presidential election in particular, we often find ourselves in the middle of situations, or we find ourselves having to deal with stories that are upsetting. Remarks and activities that are upsetting. For instance, something that we'll touch a little bit on today, the things that often happen at the political rallies of one Donald Trump. There's a story in the news recently about how these protesters were manhandled, beaten, hurt, and then more protesters came in to try to shut down the rally, and then it became something where the entire rally had to be postponed because of fears of violence and this sort of raucous atmosphere that we've gotten ourselves into. That can be upsetting to people. And when you hear about it, it's actually designed to be on several different levels. It's actually designed to be something that upsets you. And what I mean by two different levels is that the media needs to get you listening to what they are saying. And they do that by, choosing stories that are going to be the most upsetting or incendiary. And they don't have any shortage of them for the most part, and it's relatively easy to find them. Although I will admit to some of the stories recently being a lot more upsetting than often is the case. But in any case, the higher perspective that I take, which I feel is as much a wellness and healthful approach as anything else, is that we take the step back and we look at these stories for what they are, recognizing that they are sort of illusory holograms that seem very real, that feel very real, and that we experience emotion and drama and passion from. And that ultimately we do this as part of a metaphysical game, if you will. You see, at the highest level of our existence, we are one. We are limitless. We are powerful. We are without death. We are one. But, life that way can maybe get a little boring. So we create versions of ourselves, if you will, avatars, if you will. And the world around us, a series of holograms, games in which we participate, I guess you could call them human games, and feel some of the most passionate, extraordinary, sometimes excruciating feelings that you can feel. Imagine going to the movies and getting so involved in the movie that you lose track of time, you lose track of where you are, and you are completely absorbed in the film. Have you ever had that experience? I've had it several times in the movies. It's not often that it happens that completely, but there are some movies that are that good, that draw you in. And I'm sure that you've probably had an experience similar to that, where you completely lost track of where you were and who you were. And that, in a way, is how this works. So we look at these stories and we look at what's going on, and rather than letting it push our buttons, we disconnect those buttons and we go into it. And if there's any kind of feeling of discomfort or anything, we actually let that bubble up to the surface. And then remember the truth, that none of it is real, that it's been created by us for a reason, and that is to experience development and remind ourselves of who and what we really are. And then we take the energy from it. And interestingly enough, when we take the energy out of some of these situations, we change them. They alter. Certainly our perception of them alters, but the situations themselves alter because of the energy that we are altering. So, in a nutshell, that's what I mean when I say from a higher perspective. So we're going to talk about some of these stories. I already mentioned the situation with Mr. Trump, and President Obama has come out with some comments about some of the disturbing things that we see. I liken it to, since we are in the transition era, and by transition era, we are in a period of time where things are rapidly changing and progressing, and progress is being made. However, in this particular transition era, the progress is back and forth, slow, and one step forward, two steps back. And this is to solidify the changes and the evolution that we are making, so that they become permanent and that they cannot be undone, as it were. So we're seeing this playing across a lot of different arenas in the Middle East, which we'll talk about, and in Europe, particularly with the Eurozone crisis, and here in this country with the things like Mr. Trump's rallies and things such as the focus of income inequality, and focus on things like Black Lives Matter, where protesters are bringing to light some of the injustices of that they experience at the hands of police authorities. These things are changing slowly, but they're also getting a lot of blowback. And in this transition era, we are experiencing maybe stronger blowback than often we are used to. So strong, in fact, that it can make us think that we're not evolving at all, although we are. A spiritual guru, and I've for the moment forgotten the name, once said that the higher we go, the brighter the light that shines, the deeper the shadow. So as we become brighter, as our consciousness expands, there's also a dark underbelly, a shadow. That's where the pullback comes from. That's where the pushback comes from. That's what I think about when I see Donald Trump and his supporters at his rallies, acting up the way that they act up. It is the dark underbelly. It is the shadow that comes from the change and the continuing, spiraling, evolving consciousness of our world. Pardon me. So that's what I feel about that, and also the things that are going on in Syria, which we'll talk about in a bit, and the blowback that has happened there. But what I wanted to talk about and bring a little attention to is that this week marked the second anniversary of the missing Malaysian plane, MH370. Now, if you don't remember, that plane left Kuala Lumpur and was on its way to Beijing, China, when contact with the plane was lost. And it's been 2 years, many extensive searches throughout the Indian Ocean, and the plane has not been discovered. They found what they think might be part of the wing. That was recently, over the summer. It was found on an island called Reunion Island, but as yet they have not been able to identify it as as coming from the plane. So they're continuing to search, hoping to find more debris. And at the time, I remember, it was a very hot news cycle. So you had all of these experts on explaining, well, we're going to find that plane. It's going to, it might take a while, but we'll find it. It's, we can, our technology is so good and we know so much about what we're doing that it's impossible for a plane to just vanish. And expert after expert, would share this point of view, and yet there was no even hint of where the plane might be. They pinpointed where it most assuredly had to be, because it most absolutely had to have landed in this portion of the Indian Ocean. And they searched and they searched and they searched and they couldn't find it. So what I said at the time, and I still hold to it, is this idea. We love to feel like we know everything, that science and our technology, has control over everything. There are no mysteries anymore. And the reason we like to think that is because many of us simply aren't comfortable living in a mystery, living in a not knowing. It's uncomfortable, and certainly for the families of the people on that aircraft, they want answers. It's very uncomfortable for them to be in the mystery, in the unknown. But the fact of the matter is that there are things, more things that are mysteries and are unknown than there are things that are known. And it just seems to me that, living in the mystery is and was the best course of action regarding this plane. That doesn't mean you don't look for it. It doesn't mean you don't try to find it. But understand that something else, something that we don't know about yet, may have and quite likely did happen to this plane. Now, I take that back, by the way. I mentioned the little part of the wing, what they call the flaperon, that they didn't know whether it came from that flight. Well, apparently on September 3rd, the French officials came out and said that they believed with certainty that it did come from that flight. So that's the official word on that. But they have yet to find any other piece of debris other than one that was found last month on a sandbank in Mozambique. They still don't know that whether or not it comes from the plane, but they think it's a high possibility. But the interesting thing is you've got one piece of this plane in Reunion Island, which is, I believe, let me look up where Reunion Island is for just a second. Reunion Island, I believe it is somewhere near Australia. I'm checking into this right now. Okay, Reunion Island is in part of France, near the Indian Ocean, near Madagascar. And Mozambique, well, that is in North Africa. So we're talking about quite a distance between these places where this debris has been found. I would have to look up where that is, but Mozambique is at the southern tip of Africa. And as I said, Reunion Island is near India. So the fact that these pieces have been scattered so far across these continents is very fascinating to me. But in any case, they're still looking. I think they will continue to find certain things. Yeah, here it is. It's Reunion Island. Australia's close by, and then yeah. So Reunion Island was, I guess, on their flight path, but Mozambique doesn't appear to be. Anyway, I think they'll find more parts. I think they'll find something that is unexpected and unknown that happened to that plane. I'll just leave it at that. All right. So quickly, let me get to Syria. So we're talking about this transition era where we take these amazing steps forward and then are pulled back. And nothing really illustrates that better than Syria. The protests that happened in 2 years ago, in 2013, against President Assad, and the movement to remove him from power, had been going rather good guns. And then came the ascending ISIS. Protesters were jailed and have been disappeared. And the Arab Spring has taken a detour. So there's this wonderful article here in the Post that I'm taking a look at, and I'm going to give you a bit of it. It says, from Egypt to Yemen, Libya to Bahrain, the brief flowering of freedom and hope that surged across the Middle East 5 years ago has failed more spectacularly than could have been imagined back when people chanting for freedom thronged the streets of towns and cities region-wide. Syria marks the 5th anniversary of its first peaceful protest Tuesday in the shadow of a brutal war that has sucked in global powers and fueled the rise of radicals such as the Islamic State. Libya and Yemen are likewise locked in savage conflicts, and in other countries such as Egypt, autocratic regimes have reasserted their control with vengeance, clamping down on liberties even more fiercely than had been the case before the demonstrations were held. In all of them except Tunisia, the moderates who dominated the early days of the revolts have been silenced, imprisoned, hunted down, or driven into exile, either by governments that sought to repress them or the extremists who moved into the vacuum created when state authority collapsed. Whether those early protesters were ever truly representative is in question. But and this is a quote from a prominent leader of the early Syrian protest, a man named Rami Nekla, and he wonders if they ever stood a chance. He says, we are hostage to two choices, either the authoritarians or the extreme Islamists. And should we accept this equation, that we endorse either dictatorship or Islamic extremism? Well, my perspective on it, coming from the transition era and the push and pull thing that I mentioned, is that these two choices that he sees, the authoritarians or the extremists, the dictator or Islamic ISIS, are really part and parcel of the same energy. They're just factions of the same energy. And that's that same energy of repression, of pullback, of fear. It's coming from the same place. And what he's not seeing is the other alternative, because that's the alternative that he stands for. And unfortunately, having been clamped down upon so hard, his hope seems to be wavering. So that choice is not a real choice. It's a false choice. And I truly believe that they will be overcome. When? I don't know. And how? I'm not sure either. But I do believe that the seeds that were sown during this period, during the Arab Spring, have not been destroyed. Not completely, some have been, and are and will continue to sprout in amazing and unexpected ways over the next couple of years. That, I think, is how our transition era is working right now. It may seem like all is lost, but you'll turn around and you will see changes starting to emerge out of all of this. So now I want to talk about another article. This one's on the noetic.org website. It's a great article by the Institute of Noetic Science. It's called Consciousness and the New Paradigm. And because when I'm talking about transition era, I'm really talking about a paradigm shift, aren't I? And the article says these days a lot of people talk about a new paradigm. In the modern world, there are paradigm shifts taking place everywhere, from ecology, economics, and health to physics and cosmology. And for many, however, when we're talking about the new paradigm, we're talking about something bigger, an approaching shift in thinking that, when realized, will constitute a deep collective change in the way we see our place in the universe. Well, that's really at the heart of all of this, isn't it? And in the article, the gentleman mentions a conference in Northern California called Architects of the New Paradigm. And speakers came to talk about a range of issues, from new energy solutions to the disclosure of government secrets. So all of these little revolutions are going on, but the biggest revolution is in our perception, how we see things. We have new theories and new breakthroughs in understanding what we call consciousness. The article says, in science and philosophy, a movement is now taking place, a growing openness towards deeper views of mind. There are many reasons why, including discoveries in physics, but perhaps the driving factor has been a widening recognition of the difficulty of explaining consciousness in purely material terms. As a psychologist and journalist, I followed this movement to places I never expected to find myself. For example, in delving into the research of scientists like Dean Radin, Robert Hahn, and Rupert Sheldrake, I learned that at least some categories of psychic phenomena actually occur, and under rigorously controlled conditions. We're going to explore this further in next week's show, but just suffice it to say that research has been done in psychic phenomena that is very powerful, well documented, and good science, and yet somehow it still doesn't see the light of day in a lot of places. The exception is noetics.org. These researchers have, and you can go to the website and you can see full reports, full papers on these experiments, and you can see how the science is as good a science as science they use to tell us that aspirin works well for protecting the heart and things of that nature. But somehow, when it comes to things like psychic phenomena, the expectation is that you have to have such overwhelmingly conclusive proof. It's like if you want to believe psychic powers exist, then you better be able to have someone who can read Shakespeare into your mind from across the globe, and it just doesn't work that way. But science, the way it is set up now, in many instances, just simply isn't set up to even explore these areas, because the way that research, the expectations of research, are not compatible with what we're trying to study. When you're trying to study something that is, solid matter, you can't use the same techniques to explore something that is, based in consciousness, which is based in energy. So that's my take on that, and we're going to talk much more about this consciousness. I want to get back into that article next week, but for now, our time is coming to a close, so let me just say, look around you and watch as the wonderful things unfold